The KOF EX duology, Neo Blood and its sequel Howling Blood are often overlooked entries in the King of Fighters franchise, being exclusive to the Game Boy Advance. While their gameplay is loosely based on KOF 99 and 2000, these titles carve their own identity with significant changes, both in mechanics and story. Unlike the main timeline, where Kyo Kusanagi is captured by nests after the event of KOF 97, the EX timeline takes a completely different route. Here, Kyo is never found by nests. Instead, he is discovered by a young girl named Moe Habana, erasing the Nest saga entirely and continuing the Orochi storyline in a brand new way. But don't let their portable nature fool you. These games are more than just handheld spin-offs. Not only do they hold up in terms of gameplay, especially Howling Blood, but their story and lore are just as rich and engaging as the mainline series. So today, let's dive deep into the story of KOF EX Neo Blood and EX2 Howling Blood, a forgotten yet fascinating chapter in the King of Fighters legacy. But before that, as always, if you like this content, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe and click the bell icon so you can be notified with every new video posted. The sheer force of Kyo's final attack against Orochi caused a massive explosion, one so powerful that it knocked him unconscious. At that moment, the whereabouts of Iori and Chizuru were unknown, leaving Kyo vulnerable and alone. However, unlike in the main timeline, fate took a different turn where a kind-hearted young girl named Moe Habana found him. Compassionate by nature and quick to form deep bonds with others, Moe took it upon herself to care for the wounded warrior. She nursed Kyo back to health, and in the process, the two became close friends. Over time, their bond grew even stronger, with Moe coming to see Kyo as the older brother she never had, demonstrating just how much she cherished those she held dear. But that may not be the only reason for their quick bonding. Moe is also the possessor of a sacred treasure, the Yatsuka sword. However, this detail wasn't revealed until the following game, and doesn't hold much relevance for now. 2 years had passed since the last King of Fighters tournament concluded in 97, with Orochi sealed away by the combined efforts of Kyo, Chizuru and Iori. The world seemed to return to a state of peace, and the fighters resumed their normal lives. Unlike in the mainline timeline, Kyo was neither kidnapped by Nest nor missing. He was free to live his life without the shadow of conspiracy looming over him. However, the peace would not last. A mysterious figure had suddenly decided to revive the King of Fighters tournament, sending invitations to the strongest warriors from across the world. But as always, something about this competition felt off. The circumstances surrounding it were shrouded in secrecy, and an air of unease settled over those involved. That unease only deepened when Iori Yagami mysteriously disappeared just as the tournament was about to begin. Suspicion quickly spread, fueled by troubling rumors that the unknown tournament host was after Orochi's power. Many began to believe that this entire event was nothing more than a front or a sinister plan tied to the ancient serpent's influence. As expected, many fighters accepted the invitations and entered the tournament, each with their own motivations and goals. Some sought glory, others revenge, and a few simply wanted to test their strength. Kyo Kusanagi was no exception. While he relished the thrill of battle, his true purpose for joining the competition went far beyond just fighting. He wanted to uncover the identity of the tournament's host, their true intentions, and most importantly, any possible connection they had to Orochi. By his side, as always, was his trusted friend Benimaru Nikaido. However, this time, they had an unexpected addition to their team, Moe. Deeply concerned for Kyo's safety, she refused to let him face this unknown danger alone and insisted on joining the fight. And so, the newly formed Japan team stepped into the arena, facing a gauntlet of powerful opponents, both familiar faces and formidable challengers. Despite the intense battles along the way, Kyo and his team pushed forward, ultimately emerging victorious in the tournament's finals. With their victory secured, they received an invitation to what was supposed to be the grand ceremony celebrating their win. But when they arrived at the designated location, they were met with something far more sinister. The supposed celebration site was nothing more than a desolate, eerie place, clearly a trap. Before they could react, an ambush was sprung, and the one waiting for them was none other than Iori Yagami himself. Still driven by his relentless feud with Kyo, Iori was determined to settle the score, and he had no qualms about taking down Kyo's teammates in the process. Despite his ferocity, Iori was ultimately defeated, but just as he was about to succumb to his bloodline's curse and enter the uncontrollable riot of the blood state, something unexpected happened. He resisted. Refusing to be a mere pawn of his ancestry, Iori managed to suppress the transformation, declaring that he was no slave to Orochi's will. It was at that moment that the true mastermind behind the tournament finally revealed himself. The enigmatic sponsor of this King of Fighters event was none other than good old Geese Howard. With a smug grin, Geese finally laid out his grand scheme, revealing the true reason behind this King of Fighters tournament. His fascination with Orochi's power had been growing ever since he witnessed Genis' overwhelming strength back in '96. That interest only deepened after his heated encounter with Ryuji Yamazaki in the '97 tournament. Like any self-respecting power-hungry jerk, Geese wanted that immense power for himself, and he saw Iori as the perfect means to making him an uncontrollable force of Orochi's influence. To do this, Geese had Iori kidnapped and then orchestrated this entire tournament as a way to push him to his limits. By forcing Iori to battle against the strongest fighters in the competition, he hoped the relentless combat would drive him over the edge, triggering the uncontrollable transformation. Once that happened, Geese would find a way to extract and harness Orochi's power for himself. But things didn't go as planned. Iori, through sheer willpower, resisted the bloodline's curse, refusing to become a slave to Orochi's influence. His ability to suppress the transformation threw a wrench into Geese's carefully laid out strategy. Now, with his plan in ruins, Geese had no choice but to face Kyo and his team directly. And, true to his nature, he wouldn't settle for anything less than a battle on his own terms, at the top of his tower. After an intense and grueling battle, Kyo and his team emerged victorious, bringing Geese Howard's twisted scheme to an abrupt end. However, despite his defeat, Geese remained eerily calm, showing no signs of frustration or despair. Instead, in true villainous fashion, he pulled off a classic Rugal move, triggering the collapse of his own tower in a last-ditch effort to take his enemies down with him. Of course, being Geese Howard, he had no intention of going down with the wreckage and made his escape unscathed. Fortunately, Kyo, Benimaru, and Moe managed to escape the crumbling structure in time, narrowly avoiding a disastrous fate. Realizing that pursuing Geese any further would likely be a fruitless endeavor, they chose to let him slip away and simply return home, their mission accomplished. Meanwhile, Iori had also escaped the destruction, unharmed. Upon hearing that Kyo had survived, he seemed relieved. Not because he cared for Kyo's well-being, of course, but because he refused to let his greatest rival meet his end buried beneath rubble. If anyone was going to put an end to Kyo Kusanagi, it would be him, and him alone. For now, however, he was content to unlock and secure his rightful place in the game's roster. One year after the events of the first KOF EX, Kyo Kusanagi found himself face to face with an unfamiliar yet intriguing visitor. The man introduced himself as Reiji Ogami, a close confidant of Shizuru Kagura and someone well-versed in the mystical force surrounding Orochi. Sent by Shizuru herself, Reiji came with an urgent request. Disturbances in the Orochi's seal had been detected, mysterious energy waves interfering with its stability. The source of these disturbances? The upcoming King of Fighters tournament. Of course it is. Chizuru believed that investigating from within the competition was the best course of action, and she wanted Kyo to take part once again, this time with Reiji by his side. Reiji, as it turned out, wasn't just any ordinary ally. Like Chizuru, he hailed from the Kagura clan and wielded techniques similar to hers. But more importantly, he possessed one of the fabled sacred treasures, the Hetsu Mirror. In this timeline, it wasn't just Kyo, Iori and Chizuru who carried divine relics. Instead, there were 10 such treasures, and Reiji was one of their chosen wielders. Despite his serious demeanor, he had a softer side. He was a father to an adorable little girl who bore a striking resemblance to a young Chizuru. And before anyone got the wrong idea, no, he and Chizuru weren't married. They were simply close friends. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Kyo agreed to Chizuru's request and entered the tournament alongside Reiji. But they weren't alone. Moe, Kyo's ever-loyal companion, also joined them. Fighting their way through one fierce battle after another, Kyo and his team finally reached the grand finals of the tournament. However, their final challenge was anything but ordinary. Awaiting them was none other than Kyo's longtime rival, Iori, who had formed an unexpected alliance with two mysterious young women, June and Miu. Iori's new teammates were no ordinary fighters either. Both were wielders of sacred treasures, much like himself. June, a strikingly beautiful and tall model with a passion for enjoying life's simple pleasures, was a powerhouse in combat. Her overwhelming strength combined with a brutal wrestling style made her a force to be reckoned with. On the other hand, Miu was her complete opposite, a quiet, withdrawn girl who exuded an air of detachment. Miu acted as though she cared for little in the world. However, beneath her cold exterior, she harbored a singular purpose: finding her missing younger brother, Senobu. Yet another sacred treasure wielder was rumored to have been kidnapped by the tournament sponsor. Despite their differences, June and Miu had formed a close bond, with June taking on a protective role, determined to help Miu in her search. How the two ended up teaming with Iori remained a mystery though. But one plausible explanation was that Iori had sensed Orochi's influence looming over the tournament and sought to investigate on his own terms. With their goals seemingly aligned, the three had formed an uneasy alliance, setting the stage for a climactic showdown between Kyo's team and Iori's new enigmatic partners. The outcome of the battle between Kyo's team and Iori's remains uncertain, but if history is anything to go by, Kyo's team most likely emerged victorious. After all, in the vast majority of KOF tournaments, Kyo's team tends to come out on top, while Iori has yet to claim a single tournament victory in the series. Regardless of the match's result, Kyo and his companions finally confronted the mastermind behind the tournament, Gustav Manchusen, or Munchusen, or whatever, I don't know how to pronounce this name. The moment Kyo laid eyes on him, he immediately recognized the sinister aura surrounding the man. Without a doubt, Gustav was connected to the Orochi clan. True to Kyo's instinct, Gustav did not bother to deny it. Instead, he took the opportunity to unveil his true intentions, introducing the trio to a young boy who wielded an unsettling familiar power. His wind-based techniques bore an eerie resemblance to those of Genets, the formidable heavenly king of Orochi who had once wreaked havoc upon the tournament. Gustav then revealed the full extent of his twisted plan. The boy before them was none other than Shinobu, Miu's missing younger brother. Having kidnapped Shinobu, Gustav intended to use his body as a vessel to resurrect Genets, allowing the fallen Heavenly King's soul to be reborn. Before Kyo and his allies could react, Shinobu, now under the influence of Orochi's will, attacked with the full merciless force of Genets. The familiar howling winds and deadly tornadoes tore through the battlefield, reminding Kyo all too well of the devastation he had once endured. A brutal fight ensued, pushing the trio to their limits. However, despite the overwhelming power of their opponent, Kyo, Reiji and Moe managed to overcome Shinobu in the first round, but their battle was far from over. As the battle raged on, Shinobu began to resist the influence of Genets, causing a dramatic shift in his energy. Being a sacred treasure himself, his struggle against the possession sent him into an uncontrollable frenzy, one eerily reminiscent of the Riot of the Blood. His mastery over wind vanished entirely. Instead, he unleashed a new and terrifying power, devastating lightning attacks. Was the spirit of Shermie now fueling his rage? Not a bad switch if you ask me. Regardless of the cause, Shinobu remained just as dangerous, if not more so. Now stripped of reason and consumed by fury, he became even more relentless, turning his wrath against Kyo and his allies. A second battle erupted, this one proving far more grueling than the first. His lightning assaults were unpredictable, his raw power overwhelming, and the trio found themselves struggling to hold their ground. But Kyo, Reiji, and Moe refused to falter. Digging deep into their strength, they endured the onslaught, pushing past their limits to stand against the rampaging Shinobu. With one final surge of determination, Kyo delivered a perfectly timed blazing punch, his flames erupting with full force as they struck their target. The impact was enough to bring the battle to an end. The intense battle had wreaked havoc on the entire structure, causing the building to tremble violently before beginning its inevitable collapse. With time running out, Reiji wasted no time urging his companions to flee, while he took it upon himself to carry the unconscious Shinobu to safety. However, Kyo and Moe weren't the type to abandon someone in need, especially after everything they had been through. Ignoring Reiji's insistence, they stepped in to help, ensuring that Shinobu was safely evacuated before the entire place came crashing down. Fortunately, their combined efforts paid off, and the group managed to escape just in time, narrowly avoiding another disaster. With the ordeal finally over, Kyo entrusted Reiji with reuniting Shinobu with his sister, Miu. But rather than sticking around for any sentimental farewells, he simply walked away, visibly irritated and utterly fed up with the never-ending chaos surrounding the 10 sacred treasures. He had more than enough of this mess and wanted nothing more than to return to a normal life, at least for a while. As for the mastermind behind it all, Gustav, he had completely vanished without a trace after Shinobu's defeat. The last anyone saw of him, he wasn't scheming another sinister plan. Nope, he was flexing his muscles and causing absolute mayhem, but only in the realm of fan-made Mugen matches. Special thanks to my patrons for their support. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and why not consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.